Welcome to the Zencast. My name is Dale Pickles. I am the host of the Zencast and I'm also one of the directors here at B Squared. If you are a new listener, then welcome to the Zencast. The aim of this podcast is really simple. We want to reach lots and lots of people and help everyone, including me, learn about special educational needs and disability. In this episode, we'll be discussing Catrina's journey with student behaviour and how her approach changed over time. My guest is amazingly called Catrina, considering it's Catrina's journey. And my guest is Catrina Lowri, a neurodivergent former Senko and advisory teacher with a dual diagnosis of bipolar and dyslexia. She is the founder and director of Neuro Teachers, supporting schools and businesses to improve neuro inclusion. The Zencast is created and produced by us here at B Squared. I normally mention our assessment software on the podcast, which everyone knows us for. But this time I'm going to talk about Eversense, our evidence and parental communication system. Eversense feels like social media, so it's extremely easy to understand and use, but it is extremely secure. It's a really safe place to share evidence of learning with parents or external professionals. It's also a great way to capture pupil voice or use as your homeschool diary or reading diary. Visit the B Squared website to find out more about Eversense or click on the meeting link in the show notes to book a meeting with me to take you through Eversense. Now, let's get on with the podcast. On this week's show, we are discussing behaviour and more specifically Catrina's journey with behaviour as a teacher and how it changed over time. My guest this week is Catrina Lowri, obviously because we were talking to a lady called Catrina a second ago. The founder and director of Neuro Teachers, Catrina is a neurodivergent former Senko and advisory teacher with a dual diagnosis of bipolar and dyslexia. Catrina started Neuro Teachers to help schools and businesses to improve their neuro inclusion. Welcome to the show, Catrina.
Thank you very much for having me back. It's really nice to be here again.
I've also just realised, discussing that intro, I was like, I've not done a podcast on bipolar, so I might book you for that as well.
Yeah, love to. Actually, do you know what? I'd really like to talk about that because I don't get asked that very much, really. Everyone asks me about all the other neurodivergent conditions, but no one ever asked me about bipolar.
I think 200 episodes, I can sit there and go, what haven't we covered? Oh, not done that one. Let's do that one. It's great.
Okay, cool. All right, well, I'll get back to you about that then, and we'll definitely book that for the future. That'd be cool. I'd love to do that.
Excellent. So you've written a blog on behaviour in your journey, and I've read all 3 parts. They're not hugely long. It's 3 parts, so it's manageable. And I think it's a lot of journey people go on. And I know I've kind of done that journey as a parent, but sometimes people don't get to the end, and that could be for a variety of reasons. And for others, once they are told how to deal with behaviour, they don't look for an alternative approach. And I think sometimes as a parent, you think back to how your parents parented you. So you repeat the same thing. Whether or not it works with you, you don't really question. And yeah, I see that probably quite a lot. And I've heard of people being told as a young teacher, this is how you do behaviour.
Yeah.
From somebody who's been in the profession for 40 years, who has that authority. They dominate the room, whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing. And then they tell this young 20-something-year-old teacher coming in to do the same. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't always work, does it?
No, it can fall very much flat on its face, if I'm honest with you. Yeah, I mean, you have to, firstly, you have to have your own style, don't you? Because everybody's going to be different. But yeah, I mean, that was the beginning of my journey, was very much like, I went all in on behaviorism. Like I had like the zeal of a convert. I had the belief, I just thought, yeah, totally. I am going to be like the strictest teacher and, I'm going to stamp my authority. I was really young when I first went into teaching. So, I was 22 when I finished my degree. I was head of German by the time I was 23. I also looked young. So I would get mistaken for the kids. One of the kids, like if I wore navy blue on that day, then I get mistaken for one of the kids because, that was the sort of school where you had to be all suited and booted, So I'd accidentally wear a navy blue, even though I had a pinstripe in it and it was different to school uniform. I'd get told I was walking in the wrong part of the school. So I felt like I really, really had to be authoritative. that people wouldn't take me seriously as a young woman because, you know, it's the late 90s and people didn't take young women very seriously in those days. How things have changed.
So much.
Well, you'd hope, wouldn't you? So, so I started off being really, really strict. And that worked quite well. And the first school that I worked in was kind of a posh, middle class, large, comprehensive in Surrey that was run along quite traditional lines. And the senior leadership had a really high kind of profile, and we'd just walk into classrooms and all the children would have to stand up, and they still did Latin. It was that sort of school. So I thought, I had this down. When I went to my second year of teaching, and I wanted to work somewhere that was a bit more challenging. So I chose an inner city school in London, and I got headhunted for this job. I was like really, really looking for a head of German. And, you know, I was super flattered about it. But it was only when I turned up to the interview, I found out that I was the 16th in line for this job. They'd had 16 people in the job previously to me in the last 2 years. And they'd all left because the children were quite wild and the school was on special measures. But I thought, actually, do you know what? A school on special measures is a good place to be because you get loads of training. And I really wanted to have the training. And they'd started doing this program called Assertive Discipline, which was quite popular in the late 90s, early noughties. And it came from the idea of this Australian couple called the Carters, who were both teachers. And it was very much a kind of, let's just assume all children will misbehave. And it's your job as a teacher to kind of make them comply. And the reason that you can either do that by boring them to death. So you would do this, they had this technique called the broken record, where you go, Dale, I want you to sit down. 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 Eventually, you would sit down out of sheer boredom or frustration with what you were doing. So it was like you were hammering the children down with your words.
I guarantee if I was in year 8 or year 9, that would become a grudge match between me and that teacher. God. I would not sit down just to see how long can you keep this up. Oh my God.
Okay, my record was 20 minutes.
I could go longer.
I know. This is the thing, right? It did become a battle of wills. I just remember this one particular kid, and he did everything. It was hilarious, really. But, you know, also very entertaining for the rest of the class.
Yes.
Because it became like almost watching a wrestling match between us, verbal wrestling match between us. So that was one of the techniques that they used. I want you to, you said thanks instead of please, which actually does work this, right? So if I say, Dale, I want you to open the window, thanks, you're more likely to do it than if I say, would you be so kind as to open the window, please? But it's more about like the demeanor in which you say that please is a question and thanks is a answer. Because they're Australian, it's sort of like part of the way in which Australian people speak. So it's more natural to an Australian person than it is to a British person. So those are two of the techniques that I found particularly appealing, but it had such simple solutions to behaviour. And it was just a case of like, you have to go all in from the beginning. You know, they talked about how the class being broken up into different sort of characters. So in a class of 30, you get the desperate 2. And the desperate 2 are going to be the kids who are the most difficult for you. And you had to identify them really quickly and come down on them like a ton of bricks. Because if you didn't, the next group of kids who are called the dodgy 8, who might go either way, you know, they might go towards the teacher if you had enough willpower, or they go towards the desperate 2, in which case then you've got 10 kids messing about.
Yeah.
And then you had like the neutral middle or something like that. And then you had the golden 2, who were the children who would behave really amazingly well, even if a volcano went off next to them. You know, that kid who somebody else in the class is exploding and she puts her hand up and goes, Miss, can I turn the page now? That child, yes. Right, who is just like completely unshakable and will do their work, whatever is going on, even if they were on a roof of a car park that's kind of exploding or something, they'd still do their work, right? So they divided them up into characters, and they decided that they were different ways of dealing with, and you had to categorize your class very quickly into these groups. And you had this technique if you were going to work with these children, and this technique if you're going to work with these children, right? And, you know, it's not 100% wrong, but at the same time, it was very, very simplistic. And it kind of, it involved a lot of relying upon unconscious bias and relying upon stereotypes. and not looking at the reasons behind the reason why these two were the desperate two or these two were the compliant two.
I can see, yeah, there is that groupings in the class. There's two, and it's how you respond to those two will impact those. And then those who are just, I'm going to say, Miss Goody Two Shoes, stereotyping gender there, but it's that sort of thing. And in my head, I look back and I'm going, yeah, it's probably, if you won those two, the troublesome two, wherever they were, if you won those round, if you got them on board, life would be easy. But it's how you do it.
Yeah, and I do agree that, yeah, if you get the kids who have the most challenges that they're up against, if you can get them on side, then it does change the culture of the class. So there isn't like nothing in this. It's just that the answers were very, very simplistic. So I went in like, oh my God, this is the best thing since sliced bread. I love this. And, you know, I was a young'un and I was basically just about to be unleashed upon inner city kids, the likes of which I'd never seen. I had done my training in Huddersfield and Leeds, so it wasn't like I'd never seen kind of like city kids, but I'd spent a year honing my trade, if you see what I mean, as an NQT in a leafy suburb where there wasn't even really such thing as a behaviour issue at all. You know, a child slightly raising their voice or wearing the wrong colour socks was disruptive in that school, you know. So this was going to be quite different. And, you know, I went in with like the morning of the first day of teaching was like, it was great. It worked perfectly. And in the afternoon, I met this year 8 class and it could not have gone more wrong. Oh, it was just an unmitigated disaster. Like I just was completely de-skilled within about, you know, a few minutes of meeting this class.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's memorable really, because there was 32 of them in the class. It was bottom set year. It was French because I was a modern languages teacher. So I'm actually a German teacher by, you know, that's the thing that I have a degree in, but I've taught French, and they always used to give me bottom set because French is not my stronger language. My French is conversational. My German is fluent, just to give you a kind of contrast. So this bottom set, and I basically just couldn't get them in the classroom. I couldn't even get them in, you know. 2 kids jumped out the window immediately, like just went out the window onto the flat roof, down the drain pipe and ran off. I told one kid to come back in and he mooned at me. So that didn't really work. So I had to I had to send a message to next door, who was she was the head of languages, but she was also assistant head. I had to send a message to say, oh, these 2 kids have absconded. So what do I do? And she went, okay, don't worry, I'll deal with it. So she rang down to the office for me. And the rest of them were just running up and down the corridor, generally like screaming and wreaking havoc and going into the year 11 lessons and everything. And then 2 kids got hold of a lighter and set fire to one of the display boards just on the corner, you know. So there were these 2 kids called John and Pasha, and I said to them in my best assertive discipline voice, because you were supposed to say, I want you to, right? So I said, I want you to give me the lighter. And Pasha said, it's not your lighter, get your own. So that didn't work. And they just continued doing what they were doing until the fire alarm went off, which is what they wanted. And then, of course, like all the kids had to come out of the class. And then there was kind of like, you know, there's like 15 minutes of havoc. And then when it came to getting the kids back into the classroom, only 8 kids came back and I didn't know what to do. So I sent one of my good kid, you know, angelic little girl, down to this just to stereotype the whole thing, because I'd sussed this class really quickly because I had training the day previously about it and I was putting it into action. So I sent her down to the office and the deputy head came up and went, so what do you want? You know, he's just like, what is it? What? And I went, well, I've only got 8 of them in the class. He went, well, okay, don't worry, just teach them and we'll go and get the others. And I was just like, what? I mean, you know, is that normal? Is that what you do? Kids run away because there's been a fire alarm that they started? So I did. I just carried on, and I did like 10 minutes of the lesson, and then it was the bell, and it was the end of the day. And I went home and had a really big snotty cry. But then I woke up in the morning and I was like, right, this is me now. That's the worst thing that could possibly happen. I'm just going to double down on everything that I've learned, and I'm going to go all in and be super strict and do loads of punishments. And like I'm just going to just, give detention for looking at me funny and all sorts, right? So I did. I went proper into it in a really, really big way. And it did have varying results, but generally speaking, I managed to get to a point where I could actually teach my classes, and they learned some French and German. So I saw that as winning. But like I said, it certainly wasn't foolproof at all. But I was well chuffed because I got a cool nickname. My last name used to be McGuffin, right? So I was born with that unfortunate thing. So in German, that meant I was Frau McGuffin, or in French, Madame McGuffin. Nice alliteration there. And the kids called me Tough McGuff. And I thought, hey, that's cool. I thought that was really good. So I genuinely thought I totally had my stripes there. But so so that's what I did. Like for the next sort of, pretty much 10 years, I sort of poopled along thinking, yeah, this is great. I've got it sorted. I'm super strict. I actually got observed once by a deputy head who told me that I was possibly too strict. Oh dear. I mean, the thing is, he wasn't teaching the kind of kids that I had, because I did end up because I had this reputation for being good at these sorts of things and being good on behaviour. I did a lot end up with the kids who were considered to be last chance saloon. And I quite enjoyed it, right? And it's not like, I did put distance between me emotionally and them, but I did like them. I liked the children. And maybe that is what came across. Maybe that's what worked. Is that I liked them.
I was going to ask one of the questions I was going to ask you was there a distance between you? Did you literally kind of not engage with the children? It was me versus them.
To start off with, I think that that was the case. Like there was some situations where I had that kind of don't smile till Christmas thing, but there's times when your personality comes out where a kid says something that's really, really hilarious, and you can't help but laugh at what it was. And because I do have a bit of a sense of humour, I couldn't really hide that from children. So I don't think I ever managed to last till Christmas without laughing. But, you got to see the funny side. And there were certain things as well, I knew, there were certain kind of glimmers that I knew I was probably making more of a relationship with the children than I kind of gave it credit. So there was this one girl, and her last name was Beach. And I taught her that French for beach was plage. And she really liked that. That kind of little kind of insight. And she'd go around telling people and say, do you know what my last name is in French? Plage. And she'd get quite a lot out of that, And she was difficult. She was had a reputation for being in and out of detention, in and out of isolation. She'd be okay for me. I wouldn't say she was good or anything, but she'd be okay. She was on board. She quite liked French. She thought I was all right. And then I was out for the day because I went on a course. And the supply teacher, she just absolutely wiped the floor with her. She just gave her hell the entire time. And I came back in the next day and I went, what was going on? What happened? You like French? And she went, yeah, but she's not you. And that's when that was one of the things when I started to think, maybe it isn't the method. Maybe there is some of my personality coming out here, and maybe that is a good thing.
That's the thing is, when you have that strict authoritarian person, you're not really solving a problem. You're not really changing anything. My parents were like that. So I always behaved when I was near them. But I did what I wanted when I wasn't with. It was just kind of, when you're that person, you have a certain reach. When you weren't in, she's not in. Great, I can do what we want.
Exactly, yeah. Exactly.
Whereas in reality, you want to help the children see why they're there and that they do have choices and options.
Mm.
And it's not just in this lesson, it is kind of everywhere. And I do think when I see this kind of strict approach, it's more like to help the teacher get through the lesson rather than to help the children.
Yeah, it's convenient. Like, and I don't mean that like to many listeners who like, I'm not being disparaging towards teaching, right, or teachers, right, or anybody who is strongly behaviourist. You have your reasons and you know your setting and the kids that you're in front of, right? So you make your decisions based upon the children who are in front of you, and you're a skilled individual. What I'm just sort of saying is that I've found that compliance isn't law abiding. Yeah, you're not law abiding if you're being compliant. Now, the thing that I always say in my training to people is, you know, as a kid, were you ever caught drinking or smoking or, you know, smoking some weed or something like that? Something that you absolutely shouldn't have been doing because it was illegal, but something that a lot of kids get up to, right? So say you were caught with a bottle of whiskey or something, and an adult caught you and told you off and possibly gave you some sort of punishment, you know, grounded you, took your pocket money away, removed your PlayStation, whatever, right? Did it stop you from going out and drinking again? Never, right? I've not met one adult who was caught with one cigarette or one joint or one, you know, bottle of beer who, you know, got a big telling off from an adult and then never, ever did it again, right? What happens is you get more sneaky.
Yep.
You hide it. If it's smoking or drinking, for example, you know, you do breath spray or breath mints, or you chew Tic Tacs or something like that. You wash your hands, you spray yourself with some revolting deodorant like Lynx or Impulse or something that smells sickly gross, like those things that teenagers wear, right? You pretend to walk in a straight line because, you know, you're definitely not slightly inebriated by whatever it is you've consumed, right? And you go to bed and say, I've just been round studying with my friend Sheila, when you clearly have been down the pub or, you know, behind Tesco's or wherever the kids hang out. Yeah.
Yep.
So you just learn to lie, right? And then the thing is that the problem with that is if you were in a situation where, say, you've got really drunk and ended up, you know, face down asleep on a roundabout somewhere or something, then your friends wouldn't want to tell your parents in that situation, or whoever the responsible adult is. And you might, you know, be sick and choke or you know, get hypothermia because it's, you know, the 12th of December or something. Do you know, you want to be able to, you want children to be able to run towards authority.
Yes. Not be scared of that person.
No, and that's why you see the thing. This is where this idea of unconditional positive regard comes from. So this is a concept that comes from Carl Rogers, but it's very popular in education. So he was a humanist psychologist from the 1950s. So this isn't a new idea. He basically said that regardless of what the behavior has been, the person, the individual, has unconditional positive regard. So I'm going to hold you as an individual unconditionally with positive regard, regardless of what it is that you've done. So the behavior is one thing. The individual still has value. We still care about you. You still belong. And when you behave like that towards children and you give them that, you've got to assume their best intentions as well. I mean, that goes back to early years, you know, and Frobel and things like that. But there's certain things that kids do because their brains are developing. There's certain things that they do because they're developing socially and they're still finding who their tribe are and they still try to find out who they are as an individual. And there's some things that they do because they've got needs that aren't being met, right? So there's all sorts of reasons why kids act up. But if you can show absolute positive regard, so I believe in you, you belong here, we care about you, and you start from that point, then if they are in trouble, then they're going to run towards authority because you are that emotionally available adult. Right. And some of the kids that I've taught over the years, because, you know, I've worked in Peru and I've worked in AP and I've worked in special schools and I've worked with children who have been excluded for all kinds of really extreme behavior. And ultimately, you get the best results out of them if you can show them that you care and that they belong. And that's basically what changed my whole philosophy.
I remember a bit when I was young being called stupid or idiot, either by my parents or maybe teachers more. And the thing is, I wasn't stupid and I wasn't an idiot. I just did something that was stupid. My action, I did a stupid action. I did something stupid, doesn't make me stupid. And I think when we grow up, we do things for various reasons. As you said, you're developing, peer pressure, unmet needs, various other things. For me, maybe something was unjust or something, so I felt I was allowed to do this. But it's important to separate what the person has done or is doing from the actual person. As you said, it's not the individual, it's the action.
Yeah, exactly that, because it's not like you are not your behavior, right? And also as well, like behavior can be good or bad, right? We have this weird kind of Disney view about behavior, you know, that whole kind of like, you're the devil or the angel, kind of like, you know, the halo effect or the horn effect thing. And that's not really how it is, because things are nuanced.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You know, if you go to Breaking Bad, for example, just going a bit extreme here, Breaking Bad, yeah, he was a massive drug dealer and he did some awful things, but he was trying to feed his family and also pay for his medical bills. So, you know, what have we learned?
Maybe not do illegal things to support your family, but there are reasons.
You know, maybe live in a country that has socialized medicine. That would be a good idea.
Yes.
But that's a whole other debate.
But that's the thing, exactly that. There are reasons people do stuff, and it sits there, and you got maybe children who are always late or always not coming in, and you find out they're a young carer.
Yeah.
And then there is more personal, more individual circumstances that you literally have to take that into account.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they're ADHD and they're time blind.
Yep.
You know, there's all kinds of there's always reasons for it. Now, it's not to say that you should be on time for things. That's important. We have to teach children that, because they're going to have appointments and they're going to have places they need to be, and they're going to have a job, and they're going to have expectations, and they might have to turn up to be on a podcast someday or something like that. So yes, they need to learn how to tell the time and to be in the right place at the right time. But however, giving them detention because they're late every single day isn't really looking at the reason why they're late. That's not
teaching them. If they can't do something, surely you have an opportunity to go, okay, so how are you? Do you have a watch? No. Do you have your phone? Well, yes, but I'm not allowed it out during school. That's a very good point. So can you set an alarm? Oh, you're not allowed to get your phone out. And if you set an alarm on your phone, it will get taken off you because you're not allowed it. But there are ways you can help them be more aware of things. But it's those sorts of things are teaching opportunities, not punishment opportunities.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I am kind of like, you know, I'm quite into natural consequences as well. You know, like if you're late to an appointment, then you miss the appointment.
Yep.
Right. Say like you spent loads of money, because, you know, being current about things. Say you spent loads of money on a Taylor Swift ticket, right? And then you were late for it. Then you missed the gig.
Yep.
You know?
That's a consequence you're going to have to deal with. And that's nothing else needs to happen because you've already been punished by missing it.
Yeah, exactly. So sometimes it is those sorts of things. So, you know, if the child refuses to get changed for PE, which is one that comes up an awful lot, particularly with primary school children who are still made to change for PE. A lot of secondary schools just let them go in their PE kit, but primary schools where they're made to change for PE, refuse to change for PE, consequences they don't get to go to PE. And it was trampolining that week and that's their favourite or whatever.
Yeah.
You know? Okay, well, you don't go to PE then.
But
I mean, if they like PE, then it's not so, if they don't like PE, then it's not so good. But you have to think of the individual in front of you.
With my girls, they're the worst at bringing mugs and glasses down from their room. Absolute worst, no matter what you say. And then they break their favourite mug because there was loads of them on the desk and it was near the edge and their desk was messy. And then as they turned, they hit it with their chair and it fell on the floor. It's like, I don't need to give any more punishment. I would just point out that if you'd taken stuff down, if your desk was clear, you'd still have that mug. And I admit that for me as a child, I probably had to learn that lesson 20, 30, 40 times. But then I've now learnt it. Yeah, I am much more, I won't just do this, I'll do it properly. I won't rush it. Because then what happens is I'll break something, which then costs me money to fix.
Yeah.
But I think as their children, it's their favourite mug, but it's not cost them anything because there's another mug downstairs. So I think it's when it's your own money, then you start to learn. But I generally, they are the ones when it impacts you, when you can't blame someone else for that consequence, that's when you learn and that's when you change.
Yeah, I mean, like if you go to a job interview and you're late and you don't get the job because you didn't turn up on time, then that's a natural consequence to it. I mean, we can go into a lot of examples for that, but I think that there is more opportunity for you to be able to do stuff like that in school, you know. Like in the situation with John and Pasha, they did set fire to something. So that's, you know, they obviously had to have, you know, they had for the safety of other children, something had to be done.
Yeah.
But you know, as I say in the blog, they kind of got what they wanted because they had deliberately set the fire alarm off so that they wouldn't have to go to school for a while. In both cases, they just found school unbearable. So that's why they did it, because they had been told in assembly that morning that if you do this, you get 2 weeks exclusion. The head teacher had stood up in assembly and told them that morning. So they found a lighter from somewhere and deliberately set fire to stuff so they could both have 2 weeks out of school. And in Pasha's case, she knew it was 2 weeks until her dad was taking her on holiday. Because this school's quite near Heathrow, you see, so you could get really cheap deals. So he got like a week in Mallorca for like 60 quid or something, because it was the middle of term time and they were going on like a Wednesday. So she knew that she'd worked it out. If she did this, she'd get 2 weeks off school and then she'd have 2 weeks with her dad on holiday. So that meant she wouldn't be in for a month.
That's the thing. One of the things that when people talk about sanctions and rewards,
that's a reward.
It's what you deem a sanction reward based on what? That's the thing. When I sit there going, "Oh, these are our sanctions," or whatever, and I'm going, "Yeah." So basically, if I misbehave, I don't have to sit next to the idiots in my class. Nice.
And I can sit and do my work in a nice quiet room. And when I'm finished, I can sit and read Lord of the Rings with my legs up. That'll be nice. Because I used to have a kid who used to do that. He used to deliberately try, because when it got too much in class, he'd just kick off in some kind of way. And then he'd end up going to isolation because he wanted to finish Lords of the Rings. But
I bet you the way he kicked off was never that bad. He just got to the threshold.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the thing. I would never do anything hugely destructive. But once you know the rules, you play to the rules. And it just, and I get that. And it goes back to that ideology that you got from Australia, is it was really simple. And I think we often go for just simple things, a simple policy, a simple sanction rewards, and inflexible, so it applies to everyone because that's fair. Apart from for some children, a sanction is a reward, and for some it's a sanction. And for some, a reward is a reward, and for some, a reward is a sanction. That it does. You can't have such a blanket rule that works for everyone.
Well, no, it's like the example that I use in the blog of this boy who, like, he kept getting loads of detentions. He was getting up to 6 a week. You can't even sit 6 detentions a week. It's not possible, right? So they decided that they would try and find a way to stop him from getting detention. And the way they were going to do this was to bribe him with McDonald's vouchers. If he got a whole week without it, then he could have McDonald's voucher. And he said, well, no, thank you. I don't like McDonald's food because it's all fried and greasy and I don't like fried food. I like detention because I get one-to-one and I can talk about my behaviour and my difficulties and I can finish my homework off. So I get some quiet time with the teacher. And it was usually somebody from additional needs who'd done it, and he was autistic. So he liked detention was good and McDonald's was bad. So in that case, the sanction and the reward were completely flipped in his head. So it wasn't going to change behaviour at all because he was getting exactly what he wanted, which was one-to-one time with some nice lady from learning support. And the Senka was lovely. I mean, I liked spending time with her, so I could totally get that. That's cool. But it was just like, completely the person on high who didn't know him had come up with this genius idea to change his behaviour, and it had the opposite effect.
And literally, if you could, for that child, rank from top to bottom the people he actually liked, that Senko would be at the top. All the lessons he got detentions in would be the teachers at the bottom, because he basically just didn't want to be in their lessons. It's really quite obvious when you just line it all up. It's rather obvious. And one of the bits in your blog was understand that 6 out of 10 instances of challenging behavior are triggered by the adult in the room. That's really important. And I remember watching Super Nanny before I was a parent, and generally just learning whatever the child is doing, they are doing it either due to lack of attention, lack of rules, lack of this. It's generally the parent's fault. And when you sit there, and when I learned that, even before I was a parent, you'd get on the plane as a screaming child. And I get to the point of going, although that's really annoying, the parents didn't prepare. The child is screaming for whatever reason. It's not their fault. It's the parents didn't kind of work out what was going on. So hearing it's only 6 out of 10, I was expecting it to be higher. But I suppose we are talking about teenagers and kids, so they are changing. But it is, to me, really obvious that it's that person causing it, the adult in the room.
Well, yeah, and also as well, like, when I say that, people think I'm teacher bashing again, right? And not. Okay, look, I've been in education for 25 years. I had 22 years in the classroom. Yeah, I got my stripes. I know it. I love teachers. I work with teachers all the time. Yeah. But actually, this is a revelation that's a real gift. This is a massive gift. Because if you could reduce instances of challenging and disruptive behaviour in your classroom by 60%, can you imagine what you could achieve?
The thing is, it is really, it's obvious. It is obvious. And as an adult, is there someone in your life that winds you up and you therefore want to annoy? Now, I'm going to stereotype in-laws. If you're not good enough for their son or their daughter and they let you know it, you kind of play up, don't you? Yeah? You do. You respond to them. You respond to how they are treating you. And there are people in your life who just wind you up. Yeah, somebody just maybe in a bar says something and you're just not in the right frame, you respond. It took that person to be there for you to do that.
Yeah, exactly. It's dog walking is one, right? Like, my dog's very small and she's extremely, like, personable. She loves people. So she'll go up and make a fuss of people. And she went up to this one man in a park and made a fuss of him. And he got really annoyed and said, "Can you call your dog away?" It wasn't like he was afraid of dogs. He just found it irritating. And I'm just like, well, she's only a tiny dog. She can leave her alone. And I was fine the minute before it happened. And I was fine straight afterwards. It was that interaction with that person. And I just thought, oh my goodness, that is a really good illustration.
Oh, it is. There are just so many little things that can just happen. And it's like when you hold a door open for a load of people and you go, say thanks then. And then they bite back and you're like, I didn't need a thank you.
No.
But I'm in a one, I needed it. And they literally were preoccupied and got shouted at for not saying thank you. We do these things. And it's often working out who's more, work out the balance of that conversation. Am I going to let them talk to me like that?
Yeah, and that's the thing. That's how I started in my career. And I still see teachers do that, right? And I have the privileged position of being able to read a child's entire behaviour record when I'm working on exclusion prevention. And I've got pages and pages and pages of things like, he rolled his eyes at me, or he deliberately lined up on the wrong side of the corridor. Or, one that I saw was a detention for pretending to chew. Was one that I saw from this child. This child had 63 detentions issued in 21 days. because the escalation policy in that school, because the school were quite sort of zero tolerance.
I'm laughing because I pretended to chew at school just to wind the teacher up. It just, if then, don't know, if they just seem to not care about me or the class, it just seemed fair game to wind them up. And I had amazing teachers. And I look back and I probably just had amazing teachers, but they didn't really care about who was in front of them. So why did I care about them?
Mm-hmm.
And I never did anything really horrible. I never did, but I just, I used to get detention. I got detention for seeing a 7-legged spider.
For seeing a 7-legged spider? How did that work?
Because I saw it. I went, that spider's only got 7 legs, and I got told off for talking. I went, oh, it's just a 7-legged spider. She went to detention. I was just like, yeah, that teacher then asked for a review of her teaching at the end of the year. I think the bad point was signified when I asked for an extra piece of paper. But she was okay. It was just, I think she went in that authoritarian way and just didn't really listen to the students.
No, well, I did that. It's one thing that I really regret doing, because now I know more and I do better, right? In the whole kind of like a massive synopsis of Maya Angelou's whole thing, you know more, you do better, basically. So I had this kid who I was working with who was year 7, and this is a long time ago, quite back at probably in the first sort of 5 years of my career, and he was autistic. And he had these little plastic, you know, from South Park, like Kenny and whatever that other one, Carter is called, whatever he's called. And we were doing role plays, and he was using them to do the role play. And he was actually, in terms of the German, getting on quite well with it. But I told him he must put them away and do it sensibly, because he's in year 7 now and we don't play with dolls anymore. And I now know that was a completely undermining and wrong thing to say, and probably on the verge of being quite ableist, because this was his special interest. And I now know that was a very, very wrong thing to say. But at the time, I was super proud of myself because I thought I was being really age appropriate with the whole thing. At that time, age appropriateness was a big thing. Yes. It comes and goes. But, but now I look back at it and think, oh, he had a way in. He was accessing the work in a way that was meaningful to him, would have, activated his working memory and improved his attainment through doing it for that. Like years later then, I had this boy who I was teaching for German, and he could only speak German if he did it in a Bart Simpson accent. So I let him do the entire GCSE German speaking exam as Bart Simpson, and call himself Bart and so on and so forth.
What would the German be for cowabunga, dude?
It's exactly the same.
Is it?
I know. Oh. Yes.
I hate bad languages where you hear someone speaking a different language, and because a lot of languages, the words develop over time. So you blah, 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 MP3. It's like,
yeah.
What? And it's just certain words, especially in computing and tech, haven't developed. So they've just taken the American phrase of what it is, or the British.
Yeah. Like the German for laptop is laptop. So you just say it with an American accent. It's the same, like Big Mac, and and then obviously the German word for mobile phone is handy, like it's handy.
Interesting.
You hold it in your hand, you see. Yeah. So it worked. It worked really well. He got a B overall. But then by that point, I knew about special interests, and I knew a bit more about autism, and I knew a little bit more about neurodivergence. And I thought, well, really, what's the harm in him doing the entire thing as Bart Simpson? But originally I would have tried to punish that out of a child, and I'm really not proud of that.
But that's the thing. What is the problem of him doing it in a Bart Simpson access for the exam? Yeah. Well, he won't be able to do that in real life. It's like, well, he can do whatever he wants in real life. It's his choice. Now, he might find that he only did Bart Simpson's when he's in a formal situation and he's anxious, and it helps him with his anxiety. And actually, if he was in Germany and he had a need to, he might try Bart Simpson. It might go wrong, so he might try it. But you just don't know. And deciding based on your own experiences is often wrong.
Well, yeah, exactly, because I'm not him.
Yes.
And that's the thing. And ultimately, it is about, like, it doesn't really matter the journey as long as you get to the end point now. And children don't learn in a straight line, which is what I was always told. Because, like, I sort of started my career at the beginning of spreadsheets. And they used to do this thing, yeah. So they used to do this thing where they would do the cats. They do the SATs and the cats, those kind of cognitive assessment tests in England. And then on those, they do a basis if they'd sort of predict, like, what this child was supposed to get for GCSE on the basis of those two tests that they'd done at the end of year 6 and beginning of year 7. And, and if you didn't get those children to that point of where they were supposed to be, then on your head be it, sort of thing. I mean, I don't think it's as absolute as it used to be, but that's how it was when I first started my career.
It was very much like that back then. And even it lasted quite a long while. And it was also if that child was there in maths, he's expected to get there to maths. And if we don't get that, it's down to his teachers and their quality of teaching and their ability. And that is the only factor, no other factor.
Couldn't be that his mum died in the week of the exam, though.
No. Or that he was undiagnosed neurodivergent, autism, ADHD, dyslexia, any of that. No. Mm. No, none of that. No, just quality of maths teaching.
Yeah. And that was a real kind of absolute, really. And I didn't particularly enjoy that, but I sort of took it quite seriously.
And I find it interesting. There are schools who will jump from one like maths scheme to another to improve maths. It's nothing to do with maths. It's to do with that relationships and unmet needs.
Yeah, and that is it. Kind of like, I have seen the power of this so many times on so many occasions, the difference that it makes in it. You can have a school with a very, very similar demographic in two different cities of this country. And in one school, like, the children are absolutely thriving and doing an amazing job, et cetera. And then in another part of the country, they can have exactly the same demographic and take a completely different approach. And it just doesn't work at all. And it is really interesting because, I travel about, a lot of my work is in the west of England and in Wales, and I see different things. And obviously we've got a slightly different attitude towards additional learning needs, as we call them in Wales, not special educational needs. And there's a lot of things that are better. It's not perfect. The additional learning needs code of practice is being reviewed, and there's lots of considerations to take into account. It's by no means perfect, I wouldn't say that, but there are quite a lot of differences in the legislation between England and Wales. And one of the things about exclusion, which I think is quite pertinent to this conversation, is, both countries, it's at the discretion of the head teacher as to whether a child is permanently excluded. But in Wales, there's more of an emphasis on the school have to prove that they've kind of left no stone unturned. So they have to make sure that they have proof that they've met all additional needs. And most importantly, and I think this is really important, that there's been no coercion or bullying involved in the child getting into the incident.
Interesting.
Because I think particularly with children who are additional needs, sometimes they'll do a thing because they have been asked to do it by a peer who may be neurotypical and could potentially be doing it for fun to a child. So I had a girl who was 8 and she'd been permanently excluded from school for scratching another child down the face, like right down the middle of the face. It was proper deep as well, like, big scratches down the middle of the face. But when it happened, this was in England, what happened when they investigated it was the children were playing robots and she was the robot and another child was the master. And the master said that you have to do exactly as I say because you're my robot. So in the rules of the game, she said that she had to do exactly as he said. And he said, go and scratch that girl in the face. So she did exactly what he said because she was playing the game. And in the game, those were the rules. And then she was the one who ended up getting excluded.
And the other child probably got nothing happened.
No, nothing happened to him because he said, I didn't think she'd do it.
There was a boy in my secondary school with Down syndrome who was manipulated by another boy who realised that if he told them, oh yeah, he doesn't like you, he said this about you, all the usual teenage stuff, he could get the boy with Down syndrome was a year above us. He was so much stronger. He could pick you up and throw you across the classroom, and not like a foot, a couple of feet, and you'd hit the lockers. And the boy just went, I don't have to hit anyone now. I'm almost like I am completely untouchable because he'll do it all. And the boy, and you watch it happen, and the teachers would tell him off. And I remember telling him, going, no, he was telling him to do everything. But it's for some children, they can be easily manipulated and not understand.
Yeah, absolutely. And and I've seen it happen time and time again. So there's another situation where there was a girl, she was at Scouts, and there was a boy who was in the year below her, and she had a camping knife, like one of those kind of like Swiss Army style ones with different gadgets on. And he went, oh, that's really cool. She said, oh, I've got a spare one at home, actually. You can borrow it if you want for the next camp. And he said, yeah, cool. Can you bring it into school for me on Monday? Right. So she brought it into school because her friend had asked her to. And then in registration, because they had like one of these vertical form group things where they had different year groups in the same form. In registration, she gave him the knife, and she got it out of her bag and gave him the knife in front of the class teacher. And so she immediately got an automatic Perm X because she brought a knife into school.
My daughter has migraines, and she's quite good with managing her migraines. She was 5 foot, 5'5" at the end of primary. So she wasn't a tiny girl. So when she had Calpol, it didn't really work because the dose was too small. So we worked out and we gave her 3 instead of 2. And we even got a doctor to sign off that would be the correct dosage for her. And I think she had a migraine and she knew it was coming. So she basically, in the morning, she took 3 tablets at 8 a.m. or 7:30, took 3 more into school to have at 11:30 or 4 hours later. She literally followed the instructions to a T. The problem came at 1:30 or 2, where she went to the office and said, I'm not feeling well. And they said, oh, we'll get phone your mum to get some. I've already taken some. She went, oh, when? And she got in trouble with the school because she bought the drugs and took them on herself. And I'm going, I do kind of get that. I kind of agree. But actually, my daughter did the right thing for her. And I said, I know there's a medicine policy. I get that. Have you ever told it to the children? And there was this quite no. So she hasn't followed a rule that no one's ever told her. So it was a real interesting that, I kind of get that she shouldn't have taken them in because...
Yeah, I understand. It's a drug.
Yeah, I get that.
And she could have taken too many or made herself ill or could have had a reaction or...
But it was one of those things and I'm like, I completely get it from both sides, but you hadn't told the child this was a rule because it was a primary school and it's whatever reason. But I was just like, I get it from both. In reality, I said to her, you haven't done anything wrong, but the school do this, so you're not allowed to. So just don't next time. We'll have to come and give it to you.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? Really, is sometimes there are these unwritten rules in particular. So in the case of this girl, she didn't see the knife that she brought in as being a weapon. She saw it as being a tool because she used it when she was camping, and she was a scout and she went camping a lot with her family. So she hadn't thought about the fact that it could be used as a weapon to hurt someone.
Yeah.
The school had a 0 knives policy and 0 weapons policy in the school. So the rules were if you bring weapons to school, you get permanently excluded. And that was a rule across the trust. And I completely see it from exactly like you say, from both points of view, insofar as it was a weapon, potentially, and kids get stabbed in school. And unfortunately, there's been quite a few of them recently. And that's a really awful thing. So yes, we have to have a rule about this. But it was quite interesting. I put it on Twitter about a year ago, and the responses were very, very black and white, really. Like, yes, she should be excluded. No, she shouldn't be excluded. What we actually did was you know, as a collective, basically, because this is when I was an advisory teacher, we worked together and we worked out a program for her, like a knife crime program for her, because she needed to be given some education in, you know, the seriousness of weapons. So she was given an in-reach project by a local kind of like charity, knife prevention charity, for 2 weeks, where she did an intensive course with other young people. And she was also sent to the people referral unit for a while to talk about, you know, to do some work on friendships and what that actually means. And then they also did some work with the neurotypical peers in order to help her. And then she was gradually reintegrated back. But they had to have a discussion with the year group and the parents, etc., to explain the circumstances and why she was being let back in and what kind of supervision she'd be under. Because, of course, parents don't want a child who brings a weapon into school, because that could have fallen into the wrong hands and all sorts of things could have happened. But she was readmitted, but it wasn't just like it wasn't a binary yes, no. And she did end up having consequences to this, and she did end up having to do the work, and so did the neurotypical peer. I just wonder what you think about that.
I get the whole school rules. I really do get that. But if let's say that was one of those, let's go on stereotyping, girls with autism who are zero disruptive, paranoid about getting everything wrong, do over the top. She's a scout, so she's very, I can imagine, really, probably the first ever incident. Yeah, in my head, first ever incident, bringing a knife in. Why did you look all the context around it? No malicious intent, not even registering there could be a malicious intent. Like, all these things, I'm going, it's kind of, it's like if you travel to a foreign country and you don't pay attention to that country's rules and you think you can do the same stuff like jaywalking. Jaywalking in America, if you have no idea what jaywalking is, it's crossing a road not at a crossing. In England, we just cross the road where we want to cross the road. In America, you have to cross at crossings. If you just went over to America and crossed as you would here, you'd get arrested. You'd get a fine or something for crossing the road. And you're going, but I'm an adult. I've crossed the road for 40 years as an adult. I can cross a road safely. There was no one there. It doesn't matter. It's the rule. And I'd see things like that going, this makes no sense. And it is really hard, but you should have. And there is that educating child about, but what was that other child's intent? What happens if someone found out you had? What could have happened? But, it is a real tough one. It is a real tough one. And there's certain things people learn through osmosis. Yeah, through either watching TV, that they might watch Grange Hill and someone bring a knife in. Grange Hill's probably not going anywhere. Or Waterloo Road or some other program where somebody takes a knife in and get into trouble. And you learn by watching that you don't do that. You learn rules just from kind of watching and experiencing. But you have to be interested in those things and not reading Lord of the Rings to pick those rules up. So it's a really strange one, that one. So other two bits I got from your blogs. The first one about that reflective practice is just reflecting on the things you're doing and adapting if needed.
Yes, exactly.
And I know you teachers, I know you're all really, 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 I could keep saying that for a very long time, busy. I completely get that. But what I've learned in my life, that I might learn how to do something, or even as a company we're doing something, and then I'm always looking for a better way. And we change things, we improve things, we get quicker, we get better. And as a parent, I'm always learning. I've spent 18 years learning how to parent. I'm still learning.
Yeah.
And I sit there, and there's certain things of knowing that every time my child's doing something, they're doing it for the first time, generally, if they're getting it wrong. They haven't done it before, and I'm expecting them to do it perfect the right first time. That makes no sense. We all learn through making mistakes. So is it things like going, okay, perhaps I didn't prepare them. Perhaps I can do things so that mistake doesn't happen. And I just learn constantly. And people might say, I don't have time for this. But if you're not reflecting on what you're doing, then generally what you are doing is going to be ineffective.
Yeah. The thing is, teachers are massively time poor and hugely resource poor, and it's got worse, right? And also, I've never known it to be more stress. Like, there's so much stress in the system. There's the most stress in the system that I've ever seen in my 25 years of working in education. Yep. Definitely. However, right, if you do have the time for curiosity and reflection, the difference that it can make is absolutely profound. Like, those penny drop moments. And sometimes, right, like, I've made tons of mistakes. On my TikTok, I've literally put a whole bunch of videos on who's challenging behavior and think times when I've triggered children, because basically on this basis that, 6 out of 10 instances of challenged behavior are caused by the adult in the room. I've caused loads, right? And I've got loads of examples on there that you can see of what I did and how I changed my practice as a result, and what a massive difference it's made. Because we do make assumptions. We make assumptions that everybody has a nice experience at school, because probably we did mostly. I didn't, by the way, but most teachers do have a really nice experience at school and quite enjoy it and like learning. And we're usually quite academic and have a reasonable level of education, which is how they managed to become a teacher in the first place. But if you spend the time reflecting upon this, and a really simple idea, if you sit in the seat where the child has to sit and look at the board and the information from their perspective, just do that after the lesson if you've got time, or later on set it up so it's exactly the same at the end of the day, and sit and look and see what they saw and try and see it from their point of view. You can just make such a massive difference.
Yes. And I think reflective practice is the practice you're doing in the class, but also lots of other things you're doing. And I think some schools have just continued on doing something for the last 15 years and can't actually tell you the reason they do that. Apart from it's the way we've always done it, which is, to me, one of the worst phrases in education.
Yeah, for tradition's sake, or because we've always done it like that, or because this is our reputation, etc., etc. And it's just like, there was some piece of research that I read years ago who I'd like to be able to attribute, but unfortunately, Dale, I cannot remember who wrote this. But the reputation of a school is usually 6 years old.
Yes.
And it's something to do with, the cycle of, for example, a secondary school or a primary school is around about 6 years.
Yeah.
So the information that you're getting. So if you ask in the community, is this a good school? Then it was a good school 6 years ago, but it isn't actually necessarily the reputation that it has now.
It is, but the parents going through that school, it's about the parents. So especially on social media, it's definitely 100% true, because from someone joining the school to when they leave the school, they then move on. So they're going to be recommending that primary school for about 6-7 years. Yeah. And then they're going to be, the primary school was ages ago, and they're forgetting about it and they're moving on to their next challenges. So without a doubt, in the eyes of the community around them, completely agree.
Yeah, so reputation is a bit of a strange one, really. That's a bit of a strange reason to do things in a particular way, because your reputation is old.
Someone was telling me, I can't remember what it was, but it was literally saying, this school's been here since 18 blah, blah, blah. And I'm going, don't care. That's not a reason to do anything. Apart from it's more of a reason for you to really think about your actions, about what you are doing. But reflective practice is everything you do. So literally, if you put the pasta on and then they boil over, are you going to change what you do the next time? Probably.
Put them on lower heat, maybe for not as much time.
Yeah, maybe not use that boost function if you're going to leave the room to do something, because you'll get sidetracked and then it'll be boiling over when you... Whatever it is, we look at things and we adapt. But I just sometimes think when we get into work mode and we're busy, we lose that ability. And generally, what you then find out is actually you've never noticed that actually what you're doing is inefficient, and that there's no. So it is, if you can find a little bit of time to reflect on what's happening, you can make life better for you and for others.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, that's why the ebook that's on my website is basically about reflective practice and working with a neurodivergent child in your class. And, you know, if you are having difficulty, particularly with the child's behavior. Now, what people come to me about is about the tip of the iceberg, and the old kind of like, that the autism iceberg or the behavior iceberg or the ADHD iceberg that does the rounds on social media all the time. But actually the really ancient idea that came back from the 1960s. What you see with the behavior is the tip of the iceberg, right? So there's a whole bunch of stuff that's going on that caused the behavior. So if you're seeing a child kick a chair over, there was it didn't just come from nowhere. It never came from nowhere. There was always a trigger. The trigger might be internal, or it could have been something that happened in the previous lesson, right? But without questioning that, you're never going to know where that came from. So that's the idea really of the reflective practice book is that it gives you, it would probably take you about 10, 15 minutes to look through and think about it from the point of view of being that particular child. So have a particular child in mind who's maybe giving you a bit of head scratchy moments or possibly causing you some challenges or disruption in your class, and look at the reasons why this is happening. And then hopefully it will help to improve things for you.
And when that child is kicking a chair, there is, why are they kicking a chair and the cause, but there's also, why have they chosen to kick a chair? Yes. So one of it is what's caused it. Another one is, what are the options they have? We all do stupid things when we're younger. And then we learn they slowly don't work and we find better ways. So that child might be kicking a chair because they're stressed, they're angry. You might be going home and immediately pouring a glass of wine. Mm-hmm. Similar thing to me.
Well, it is, isn't it? It's all a way of releasing behaviour or pushing it down, isn't it?
That's the thing we forget about. They're doing this like, but he doesn't have access or shouldn't have access to alcohol. Also, that's not really a great solution. But it's both situations is you're having the alcohol because something's not great, but you kind of maybe you're trapped, whatever reason, but it is a similar sort of thing. You are exhibiting a behaviour and there is a cause. If everything was rosy, you wouldn't be going for that glass of wine the moment you got home.
No, exactly. Like, I don't drink now, but when I was right at the beginning of my career back in that school, one of the first pieces of advice that was given to me, besides make sure you're wearing sensible, comfortable shoes because you're on your feet all day, the second one was make sure you have a box of wine in your fridge because you're going to have a tough day and you're going to want a glass of wine at the end of the day. Now, I don't drink now, but at the time, I always used to have a box of wine in my fridge for their tough days. And you think, like, there's so many teachers who do that, and it's completely understandable, right? I'm absolutely no judgment. I did it for years. Drinking doesn't work for me now because, aforementioned bipolar, I'm on antipsychotic medication. So I had to give it up. But then you find other ways, don't you? So I turned to chocolate, for example, or, binge watching something on Netflix. There are ways of numbing a situation. Kicking a chair over is a relatively innocuous thing to do as well because it doesn't hurt the chair. Because the chair's made of plastic, usually in a school, made of plastic, quite uncomfortable. Interesting, at some point, Dale, we need to go on a thing about why private schools have more comfortable chairs than state schools. I'd like to know the answer to that question, please.
Oh, trust me, there's a whole thing around schools and the way they do things compared to the adult world. There's a whole thing, and some of it I get, but some of it I really don't get. But that could be a whole ranty podcast. But,
chairs, do a whole thing on chairs.
Yes. And one thing that I just want to end on, which is a quote from Einstein. The definition of insanity is repeating same behaviours and expecting a different outcome. So if you're rewarding a child and they're not changing their behaviour, is it a reward? If you're giving sanctions to a child and it's not changing the behaviour, is it a sanction? But also, do they respond to rewards and sanctions? There's a whole thing about, do they even respond to that, which we've not even touched on. But if something's not working, you've got to change what you're doing.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, sanctions and rewards only work for about 60% of children, if you believe what Louise Bomber says. I'm quite in favour of it, is that a child has to have good enough care. So they have to experience what sanctions and rewards are and know that they're supposed to be good or bad. Otherwise, they just are completely irrelevant to the child and they won't make any difference. Like the thing with Pasha and John, them getting exclusion, wasn't in any way a sanction for them. It wasn't going to change their behavior in the slightest bit, and it didn't at all if you read the blogs. So and it is, that thing about repeating yourself over and over again. Like these children getting 63 detentions in 21 days didn't change their behavior at all.
No.
Right? It's always the same kids in detention. It's always the same kids in isolation. It's always the same kids getting permanently excluded. Maybe we should look at those patterns instead and think of different ways of doing these things.
I literally used to toe the line. I literally worked out how to put the least effort in, but how to get in the least trouble. And I worked out how to follow this line where I wouldn't get the detentions. I would just literally play the game the entire time. Part of the reason, and the thing is, it's been since I got diagnosed with my autism and ADHD, and I reflected back on my childhood and I looked through all the reports. Everything was always my fault in all these reports.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, in my head at the time, it wasn't my fault, but the blame was put on me. And so there was just disconnect between me and certain teachers that they thought I wasn't trying, wasn't putting the effort in. But I'm in set one, so you can't find this difficult. It's like, but I am. No. And I just remember, and I look back and I just sit there and go, I could have gone really, really off the rails, but there are reasons I didn't as I look back. But I just didn't care about, I didn't see the point or education because no one seemed to care about me. So why am I bothering?
Well, no, that's exactly that. Is I don't know whether you know the podcaster. She does a lot of work about well-being. Her name's Mel Robbins.
I don't.
And one of the things she said in one of her recent podcasts, which I found really striking, is children want to be noticed, they want to belong, and they want to be celebrated. That's the three things that they want.
I would add, adults want that as well.
Well, everybody does, don't they? But it's just like children start off school wanting those three things. And what they end up getting is they end up getting ignored. They end up feeling othered. And they end up feeling like they're invisible or belittled. Yep. And that is particularly the case if you have additional needs or you've got tough things going on in your life.
Yeah.
Right? And it's so simple, the idea of creating a sense of belonging within a school, but it's so effective, right? And if you say to children, you belong here, this is your community, we care about you, we are going to give you unconditional positive regard, you can do anything if you feel like you've got a sense of belonging. The things you can achieve are unlimited in terms of fulfilling your potential, in terms of fulfilling your aspirations. Like, I've seen it in those schools that do that. They do phenomenal things, and they got the same budget and the same time and the same number of staff of any other school who's kind of averagely the same size of them. But the difference is the feeling of the sense of belonging. You don't need to be giving out detention because you're wearing the wrong socks.
No.
Because, if a child has a pride in their appearance because they want to look like they're part of a community, then they will take a pride in their appearance.
My wife's gone back into teaching this year, and she's teaching at a school for autism and ADHD. And one of her children in her class a couple of weeks ago kind of sat there and went, "We're all nerds." And then highlighted what each person in that class was a nerd of. And he went, "We're all nerds." And my wife went, "What am I a nerd of?" He went, "You're a nerd of kindness."
Oh.
She came home and told me that. I went on to Etsy and I bought a little metal pin badge which said "Nerd of Kindness." Oh. It cost me £3 something. And she's taken that in. And the best bit is he's going to see that badge, and it's something he said that she has listened to and really liked, and she now has a badge to say it. Belonging. It was just having that conversation and taking that time to listen. Yeah, he's not always the best. That's his needs. Yeah. And it's that supporting, it's that relationship. And it is really, really important at every level to have that. I've seen it as a football coach. I'm seeing it as a volunteer youth worker. I'm seeing the power of that relationship and being interested in them and how they respond.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so restorative and so kind of like magical almost. You know, if children don't feel a sense of belonging in school or their family or their community, then that's when they start turning towards nefarious actors.
Yep.
That's when that's when gangs pop in, because they certainly create a sense of belonging, right? And like if you ever have the prevent training, one of the things that really stuck with me is it only takes 2 weeks to groom someone into doing an act of criminality. 2 weeks.
It doesn't take long. If that person plays on the bit that you want to feel belonging, you want someone to notice you, you want someone, and they do all that, yeah, you're going to do things to keep that interest.
Exactly. But if you turn it in your head, right, again with the 6 out of 10 things, because I'm an optimist and I look like this, that means that you can create a sense of belonging within your classroom within 2 weeks.
Yes.
Right. And I'm not saying grooming or anything gross or nefarious, by the way, before anyone starts getting all itchy and scratchy about this, right? What I'm saying is showing kindness to somebody could probably have even stronger results than something like that. So bring people towards your community, bring people towards your school, right? That's what inclusion is meant to be. You belong here. We care about you. Our regard for you is unconditional, right? Yeah, you're going to make mistakes. You're a kid. Yeah, you're in difficult circumstances. We understand that, but we are going to move this forward together, right? And in every single phase, when you fall down, we're going to pick you up, and we're going to have really, really high standards, right? This isn't about dropping standards. We're going to give high levels of support, but we're going to have high standards, right? And you can do both. And if you do both, the results that you can get are amazing. And I'm not just talking about GCSE results, because that's neither here nor there, really. I mean, who remembers their GCSE results, really, unless you have to write it on a form? Who knows where your certificate is? I had to find my certificate the other day. I couldn't find it. It's from 1991.
Oh, mine's still in my Burgundy Record of Achievement folder.
Oh, I've still got that as well.
But it's a high standard, but also expectations. And I don't mean expectations of behaviour. I kind of mean expectations that they can achieve. Don't write them off. They might have been written off by someone else, but if you have expectations that, no, you can do this. I know you can. And you help them see that they can, that is a whole thing you're going to change in their life.
Yeah, exactly. As well, and also as well, don't just if they've got an ambition to be a YouTuber or something like that, which people always, or a TikToker or whatever, don't dismiss it outright, because actually they could be doing something really cool and awesome with that situation. You can make a pretty decent living out of it. I'm not everyone's going to be Mr. Beast, obviously, but you can make a good sideline out of it. If nothing else, it's a good sideline.
That's the thing, is about to say, it doesn't necessarily have to be their main employment, but why? No. Yeah, no, definitely.
They could go into social media management, for example. There's a lot of money in that. It's a future-proof job. Don't dismiss it just because they don't want to go and do A levels or whatever. There's all kinds of things that kids can go into and show their special interest. I think I said this to you before, but the job of being a skateboarder wasn't a job until Tony Hawk's came along, was it?
Let alone being a podcaster.
No, that wasn't a job 10 years ago?
Really?
Maybe? 50? No.
I think it was podcasting. I think the original iPhone, it kind of had about 20 years, I think, from the start of them. Maybe. And you might find reference to people recording things early, but it kind of was around them as you could travel, listen to them on the move, is when they really started coming in with iTunes but that's literally 20 years, but that was the start. But when did it really pick up? Probably about 10 years ago.
Yeah, probably. That's how long I've been listening to stuff for, really. And I listen to several a day now. So
I don't have the time anymore. I used to do lots of traveling, always good. I find if I need to listen while doing something which occupies part of my mind. Otherwise, I'm not listening. Yeah. But I'm going to wrap up the podcast because we're going to be meandering onto lots of different topics shortly. Although if I don't end, Because there's lots of things you said. I want, no, that's a whole half-hour conversation at least. So thank you for coming on the show today. Catrina's given me some links, including the link to her blog and her ebook as well. And you'll find those in the show notes as always, along with Catrina's contact details. And you'll also find the show notes, my contact details as well. And as I said, you'll find the show notes wherever you listen to the podcast or on the Zencast website. So thank you for listening. If you haven't subscribed already, click on that subscribe button. You can follow us on social media, on Twitter, at the Zencast. I'm not calling it X. On Facebook, the Zencast, and Instagram, the Zencast. And if you're looking for a simple, secure way to capture and share evidence of learning, or a way to capture pupil voice, a way to celebrate and share achievements, or a simple way to communicate with parents, you need to have a look at Eversense. Eversense is our evidence system. There's so much more to help boost parental engagement. It's like having a private orange Facebook for your school. To find out more about Eversense, visit the B Square website. You can also find about our online training, our CPD, read our blogs, watch our webinars, and so much more. You'll find a link to the website and to book a meeting with me so I can take you through Eversense or answer any questions you have in the show notes as well. So thank you for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Zencast. It is goodbye from me.
Goodbye. Thank you ever so much.
Bye, everyone.